All I had was my faith. And in my mind, I thought I knew how God was going to work this thing out for me. And the thing that I'm talking about is I needed $10,000. And I needed it in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks. All I had was my faith. I wasn't dependent on a job. I wasn't dependent on my boyfriend. All I knew is all I needed was the faith of a mustard seed. God said a faith of a mustard seed will move mountains. And a mustard seed is so small. So let me share with you my testimony. And I hope that this would encourage you and help you along your journey or when life is lifing for you. So to give you a bit of context of my story, my oldest child was in college and their tuition was $40,000 a year. It was $10,000 per quarter I had to pay. And I was working a job and I was only making $13.65 an hour. But if I worked overtime, that $13.65 turned into $20 and some change, right? So one day my child called me and he was like, Mom, he was like, they're asking for the tuition and I have to have it paid by X amount of days. I said, okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it for you. A week go by and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to get this money. I'm going to sign up for overtime and I'm going to work all this overtime. If I got to work 100 hours a week, I'm going to work 100 hours a week and I am going to get this money to pay this tuition. So during this time, a coworker, now listen to this very carefully. I had a coworker. She was going through some financial challenges too. So she came to me and she was telling me what she was going through. And she says, girl, I need at least $1,200. I need to pay my light bill. I need to, buy my kids things, this and then the third. And she said, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I can't borrow any money. I said, girl, me either. And I said, but what we're going to do, we're going to touch and agree and believe that God is going to work this thing out for us. She said, yes, because he said, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, I will be in the midst. And I said, and you know what? We ain't going to wait till it's over. We're going to go ahead and praise him now. And in the tire room, because we worked at a Goodyear Tire Rubber Company, we was in the middle of the aisle just giving God glory, praising God, knowing that he was going to work this thing out for the both of us. Well, lo and behold, the overtime board opened up. And I said, yes, this is my chance. I know I'm going to get all this overtime and I'm going to work and get my son this money. Well, guess who got the overtime? She got the overtime. And I'm human. And I'm sitting up there saying to myself, what? And I said, no, look, God, she only needed like $1,400 or $1,500. I need $10,000. And she was really happy. And I said, oh, I'm happy for you. She said, thank you, girl. She says, listen, I done got all my bills paid. Now, mind you, another week done went by. She done worked all week, all the overtime. I got 1 or 2 days in. And she said, girl, I done got everything paid for. She says, what about you? I said, no, I didn't get that much overtime, but I'm happy for you. And to be very honest with you, jealousy had set in. So I walked back up the floor and I was feeling this ugliness and I really wasn't happy for her. I mean, I was, and then again, I wasn't. And I said, oh girl, you jealous. I called my own self out. I said, you're jealous. And I said, Lord, please forgive me. I said, if you did it for her, I know you'll do it for me. And let me pause right there. And I'm going to go back to when we were in the middle of the aisle just praising God, thanking him in advance for the money, right? I told her, I said, listen, I can't tell you what I am believing and trusting God for, because my faith isn't like your faith and your faith isn't like my faith. You may not believe like I believe because I don't put God in a box. She said, okay, girl. She said, but I'm just going to still believe him with it. You ain't even got to tell me. I'm just going to believe he going to do it. If you believe it, I believe it too. I was like, all right. And I said, now listen, when you see me running through this plant, up this aisle, you're going to know God did it. She's like, all right now. All right, let's move forward. So I'm at my machine. And I said, God, please forgive me for being jealous of her. And I said, because if you did it for her, I know you'll do it for me. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know where it's going to come from. But I know you're going to work this thing out for me. By that time, my telephone rings. My child calling me. He says, Mom, I got another email. And if I don't have the money, by this time it was 2 weeks in. He said, if I don't have the money in by such and such by the end of the week of next week, I'm going to get locked out of my dorm. I said, son, have I ever let you down? He says, no, ma'am, you haven't. I said, if I told you I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it and you're going to have it. I said, don't worry about the emails. I'm going to take care of it. He says, yes, ma'am. When I got off the phone, I said, okay, God, what you going to do? What you going to do? Because, see, I ain't been getting but like 2 or 3 days overtime, but you know what I need. And I know you're going to work this thing out for me. And again, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I believe you're going to do it. So in my mind, it came in my mind, why don't you ask your boyfriend to go in his 401k and get the money out of his 401k and you'll just pay him back? I said, no, I'm not dependent on him. And I'm at my machine talking to myself. I'm going to trust God because I know He going to do this thing. When I tell you it was like my back was literally up against the wall. And if you're watching this, you may have been in the same situation as well. Or you may be going through that now. But let me tell you something. All you need is the faith of a mustard seed. And I literally tried to find a mustard seed here, but they don't have any mustard seed in this house. A mustard seed is so small. That's all you need is the faith of a mustard seed. And He said in His word that all you need is the faith of a mustard seed and it will move mountains. But just imagine if you had more faith than a mustard seed. And I'll tell anybody, my faith is so much more than a mustard seed. If you sit there and if you was in a situation and you knew you needed $10,000 within the next 3 weeks, would you believe God would do it for you? Would you put him in a box and be like, well, I know he can do other things, but $10,000 without me literally going to the bank and borrowing the money or borrowing the money from my family? I don't know if he'll do that. Well, honey, that's not my story. I didn't have the means to get the money. I don't even think my credit was good enough to go to the bank and borrow $10,000. So the last week come, I hadn't told not one soul. I'm at home getting ready for work. Y'all watch this. I'm at home getting ready for work. My mother calls me. She says, hey, she says, Veronica, she said, do you remember when I applied for disability? I said, yeah, Mama, that's been over 15 years ago. She said, well, I got a letter through the mail. And she said, they told me in the letter that they miscalculated my money when I signed up for disability and they owe me back time. Now, at the time, I'm not thinking, and I was like, Mom, I said, now, I don't think that would come back 15 years later. There's a lot of con people out here, Mom. I was like, take the letter to the bank and see what they say. She said, I already have. And I said, well, what did they say? She said, they told me the letter was legit. And she said, they also included the check. I said, well, Mama, I said, listen, you and Daddy deserve everything that you get. And I said, so I'm glad everything, they went back and redid your disability. And I'm glad that you're getting it now. She said, well, wait a minute. I said, well, what is it? She says, you didn't even ask me how much my disability was. I said, okay, and I'm getting ready for work, lacing up my steel-toe boots. I had the phone like this, and I said, well, Mama, how much was it? How much was the check? She said, $40,000. I said, what? She said, $40,000, and she said, and I'm calling you because you've been so good to me and your daddy. You've always helped us out, and you never complained about anything. And I want to share it with you. Oh, my God. That's exactly what I said. I said, oh, my God. I said, oh, my God. She said, what is it? I said, I hadn't said anything to anybody. But now I think it's time for me to say it. She said, well, what's that? I says, Mama, I need $10,000, and I need it by Friday. And by this time, I think it was like a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. She says, listen, meet me at the bank Friday. and I'll be more than happy to give you that $10,000. I said, oh my God, Mama, I'll pay you back. She said, no, you ain't got to pay me back. That's my grandson. Would you have believed that God would have came through for you like that? Would you have believed that if you were in a situation and your back was up against the wall and you didn't have no other means of getting the finances that you need, would you have believed God would have done that for you? I'm here to tell you, if he did it for me, he'll do it for you. And when I tell you, when I got that money on that Friday, I called my son and said, listen, I'm wiring this money to you. He said, you got it. I said, son, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what God did. I'm sharing my testimony with you guys because a lot of times we put God in a box. We often think like, if we can see it, he can do it. But how about when we can't see it? How about when our back is literally up against the wall and we have no other means, your credit bad, you don't have any money in the bank, your family can't loan it to you, or if they got it, they will refuse to loan it to you, and you ain't got no other choice but to depend on God. When I tell you, if you would just keep the faith of a mustard seed, you ain't got to have as much faith as I have. And I know that you're watching this for a reason. When this video goes out, it's going to go to the people that's supposed to see it, that's in a situation, that's in a financial bind, and you don't have no other way to get the means that you need. And God is simply telling you through my testimony. Where's your faith of a mustard seed? All you need is just go get a mustard seed and look at it. If you don't have it, ask your neighbor if they have a mustard seed. Look how small a mustard seed is. And if a mustard seed can move mountains, the faith of a mustard seed can move mountains. Imagine if you had a handful of faith. What if you had a handful of faith? I need you to believe and trust God for the impossible. Because what you gonna do if all you have is faith? If all you have is faith, that's all you got. You ain't got no other choice but to depend on him. And I know the enemy will come in and tell you, different things. You got to put that out of your mind and go to, let me tell you where it's at in the Bible, where God said all you needed was the faith. Let me find it right quick. Hold on 1 second. Let me find it. It's in Luke, I believe. It's in Luke. Hold on. I got you. And I'm sorry it's taking up. Let me get my glasses. But yeah, this is what you need. You needed to hear this today. You needed to hear that all you needed was the faith of a mustard seed. Matthew 17:20. Grab hold to it. Write it down and keep it going through your mind. And the verse is a response to when the disciples couldn't cast out a demon. Listen, and he told them, even tiny faith, mustard seed faith, is powerful enough to move the impossible. Okay, one more for you. Luke 17:6. Come on, somebody. And the Lord said, if ye had faith as a grain of a mustard seed, ye might say unto this sycamore tree, be thou plucked up by thy root, and be thou planted in the sea, and it should obey you. All you need is the faith of a mustard seed. That's all you need. And I'm glad you came across this video, because this is God speaking to you, saying, I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to do the impossible, because I still work in midnight. And the midnight, not meaning literally night, but midnight could be the turmoil that you're going through when you're trying to figure it out. That's your midnight. And God loves to show up in that time. And I pray that when this video reaches you, it reaches you. And I know it's going to reach you in time, that you just grab hold. If you don't have a lot of faith, all you need is a faith of a mustard seed. Hold on to that faith. God will show up for you, and he will show out for you. And all he needs you to do is still believe in him. Stand 10 toes down and say, for God I live, for God I die. I know you coming for me, because I believe you're going to move this mountain. So again, that's my testimony. I got many more to come. Stay tuned for the next testimony. It's literally going to blow your mind. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video. Comment below. This was for me. If this video was for you, comment below, this was for me. And if it wasn't for you, say, I resonate with it, and I'm going to share it with somebody that I know is going to help in this season. Because in this season, we're living in uncertain times, and we have to depend on our faith. We got to see what we believe. We can't believe what we see. Come on, did you grab that? Don't believe what you see, but see what you believe. When I was in that situation and I needed $10,000, in my mind, I'm saying, oh, I know God gonna do it. I know he gonna do it. But I left this out. Now, I told you that I told my friend at work, when you see me running, when you see me running through the plant, you know God done worked this thing out. Now, let me say this. When you're believing God for the impossible, you can't go telling everybody. Come on, somebody. Give me some hearts. You can't go telling everybody, because everybody ain't going to believe the way you believe. And if you believe in something that's really like so impossible, they will put doubt, and you don't have time for that to be on board. So I had to keep it to myself. That day, that Friday, I come running through the plant. They were in the safety huddle. And when she saw me running, she just started just running in place, talking about, oh my God, oh my God. She said, he did it. I said, yes, he did. I said, but let me tell you what I needed. She said, girl, what did you need? I said, I needed $10,000. She said, and you got it. See that? I said, yes. I said, God came through. She started crying. She said, oh my God. She said, I'm so glad you didn't tell me that, Veronica, because I wouldn't have believed he would have done that. $10,000? I said, that's right, $10,000. And I hope I'm not yelling, but I done got excited. I said, yes, $10,000. I said, see, my faith ain't like your faith. I don't put God in a box. I believe the impossible, and I expect a miracle. Lord have mercy. I said, God, I thank you. And she just cried and said, God, thank you. She said, now that really blessed my soul. So I said all of that to say this. Listen, don't tell everybody what you believe in and trust in God for, because they'll cast doubt on it. Don't do it. Keep it to yourself and keep talking to God. Even when the enemy is putting stuff before you, saying it ain't going to happen, you say, but I trust God. All I have is the faith of the mustard seed, or I got a handful of faith. And I know he going to work this thing out. So with that being said, I'm going to end this testimony, and my next testimony going to literally blow your mind. So stay tuned for my next testimony. Y'all have a great day.